The vault door had a 6-spin tumbler lock, an outdated German mechanism, and Sierra cracked it in 11 seconds. She eased the heavy steel panel open with both hands, angled her headlamp inside, and went still. He was sitting in a chair. Not hiding, not alarmed. Sitting, long legs crossed at the ankle, one arm draped over the armrest with the ease of a man who had nowhere better to be, watching her with gold-flecked eyes that caught her lamp and threw it back like coins at the bottom of a well. "You're late," said the Alpha King of the Asheville pack. Sierra did not scream. She was a professional. She took one controlled step backward, heel to the cold marble, and he raised one finger. "The door behind you is locked from the outside now." A pause. "I did it myself. 20 minutes ago." She turned anyway. The handle did not move. She faced him again, heartbeat high but even, the way her mother had taught her to breathe in enclosed spaces. 4 counts in, 4 counts out, never let them see the tremor. The vault room was small, lined on 3 sides with cedar shelving, scroll cases, sealed iron boxes, the dry smell of old parchment and war medals. The Alpha King filled the chair like the chair had been built for him specifically, which she realized it probably had. This was his vault, his fortress, his war room 3 floors underground, and she had just walked into it like a moth toward a lamp she hadn't understood. "I want to show you something," he said, and reached without looking into the cedar shelf beside him. He set a scroll case on the arm of the chair. Black lacquer, bound in a cord she recognized, bone white, twisted from something that was not rope. "Do you know what this is?" "No." "Liar," his voice was even, not cruel. "You were hired to steal it. You know exactly what it is." Sierra said nothing. The headlamp made his shadow enormous against the vault wall behind him, a broad-shouldered darkness with the shape of a crown in it. The coronet he was not wearing tonight, but that seemed to exist in the air around him regardless. "The Asheville Treaty," she said. "Yes." He did not move. "Tell me who hired you." "I don't know his name." "That's probably true." He tilted his head slightly, and she felt the assessment in it the way you feel a temperature change, not threatening precisely, but total, as if he was reading something written on her that she hadn't consented to put there. "You were given a drop location, a payment in 2 installments, and a set of instructions that were more specific than any professional fence would need." His eyes moved to her hands, the slim tools still caught between her fingers. "Whoever hired you knew this vault's exact layout. They knew my rotation schedule. They knew the lock model, a beat. They didn't know I changed it yesterday." Sierra looked at the lock. She thought about the 11 seconds, the old German mechanism. "You left the old model in place," she said. "I did." "You wanted someone to get in." "I wanted you to get in." He uncrossed his ankles and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the lamp caught the line of his jaw, the tiredness in it, the kind of tiredness that isn't sleep debt but something older. "Sit down, Sierra." She did not sit. "You know my name." "I know considerably more than your name." He said it without heat, without smugness, just as a fact, the way you'd tell someone the time. "Your mother's name was Lena. She died when you were 9. She worked as a cartographer for the Eastern Border Commission, and she was very good at her job, which is why she was killed for it, and which is why you have been very carefully and very quietly stealing documents from the people who ordered her death for the past 6 years. A pause. "Sit down." This time her legs made the decision before her mind did. The low stool near the door, she found it without taking her eyes off him, lowered herself onto it and breathed. "That's not public information," she said. "No." "How do you know it?" He reached into the cedar shelf again. This time what he said on the armrest was not a scroll case. It was a locket, small, oval, the silver gone dark with age, and even from across the room she felt it. A warmth that had no business being warmth. A pull that moved through her chest like a hook, finding something it had been looking for. Her mother's locket. She had lost it 3 years ago. A raid gone wrong, a river crossing, a bag left on the wrong bank. She had grieved it the way you grieve a person. "Where did you get that?" she said. It did not come out as a question. "It found its way to me." He set it down on the armrest, did not move it toward her, did not offer it, simply left it there between them in the space the lamplight made. "The crest on the back, the wolf over the mountain, is the crest of the Asheville founding house. Your mother was born in this territory. Did you know that?" Sierra stared at the locket. The warmth in her chest was not metaphorical. It was physical, specific, located, a heat below her sternum that had no fever behind it, no illness. It felt like standing in sunlight after a long season of cloud. "She never told me where she was from," Sierra said. "She left at 16. She made a life elsewhere and she built it well." His voice was quieter now, not softer, quieter. The distinction mattered. "She carried that locket because it was hers by blood. It was given to her mother and to her mother's mother going back 7 generations. This house keeps a record." He met her eyes. "You are the last of that line." Sierra did not speak. "The person who hired you tonight is a man named Edric Voss. He controls 3 of the 5 border councils. He has been trying to get his hands on that treaty for 4 years because it contains a clause that, if enacted, would dissolve his authority entirely. An old territorial agreement that predates his appointment and that he does not have the legal standing to override." The Alpha King sat back again. "He hired you because you are genuinely the best at what you do, and because if you were caught, your history makes you easy to discredit. No family, no pack, no name that anyone powerful would defend." A pause. "He was wrong about that last part." "I have no pack," Sierra said. "Not yet." The word landed. She felt it in the same place as the warmth from the locket, below the sternum, specific, not painful, not comfortable, something else entirely. Something that her body seemed to recognize before her mind had caught up. She looked at him, really looked, for the first time since the lamp had found him in the chair. He was not young. He was not old. He was the age of someone who had made a great number of decisions and was still living with all of them, and the weight of that was in his face without breaking it. His eyes were still on her. They had been on her the whole time, she realized, in the patient way of someone who is not waiting for her to do anything in particular, only watching because she is worth watching. She became aware that she was still holding the lock tools. She set them down on the floor beside the stool. "Why didn't you just come and find me?" she asked. "If you know all of this. If you knew I was coming tonight, why the theater of the vault?" Something moved in his expression, not quite a smile, not quite not one. "Because I could have sent a guard to find you 3 years ago and brought you here in chains and told you everything I just told you and it would have meant nothing." He reached out and picked up the locket, held it in his palm. The silver was dark and small against his hand, and he looked at it the way people look at things they have been careful with. "The bond doesn't work by force. That's the first law of this house. I can't claim what isn't offered. I can only arrange the conditions under which you might choose." He set it down again, facing her. "And I was curious to see how fast you'd crack the lock." 11 seconds, she said. "I had 12 in my estimate." The not quite smile again. "I was wrong." She did not leave that night. Not because he stopped her. The outer door unlocked at some point during the hour they talked, and she noted the moment and chose not to use it, which was its own kind of answer to a question she hadn't asked herself yet. She stayed because the talking did not feel like an interrogation. It felt like 2 people eating at the same table who have just realized they have been hungry for the same thing for a long time and are figuring out the etiquette of that. He told her about Edric Voss in the kind of detail that only comes from years of careful watching. He told her about the treaty, what it meant, why it mattered, the clause that Voss needed destroyed, and that the Asheville Pact needed upheld. He told her about the network of stolen documents that had been moving through the underground channels she worked in, and she recognized the shape of it from the inside, the way you recognize a pattern from inside a weave. She told him carefully, with the parts of herself she had learned to keep behind glass still behind glass, about the 6 years. The names she had found, the documents she had returned to the families they were taken from, the 3 men she had exposed, and the one she had not been able to reach. "Voss," she said. "Voss," he agreed. It was past 3 in the morning when she realized she was tired. Not the trained alertness of a job site, but genuinely, bodily tired, the kind that means the adrenaline has burned through and left the person underneath. She noticed it because he noticed it first, a small shift in his attention, a stillness that was different from his usual stillness, the particular quality of someone who is trying not to show that they see something. "There are rooms," he said, "if you want them. I don't need charity." "It's not charity." He stood, and she revised her estimate of him upward, because standing he was considerably larger than sitting, not aggressively so but undeniably, the way a mountain is large. It simply occupies more space than other things, and it is not apologizing for that. It's a place to sleep before you do something irreversible in the morning. He looked at her with those coin-gold eyes, and she had the disorienting sense of being read again, only this time it did not feel invasive. It felt like being known. "Voss will be looking for you at first light. He'll know the job failed. He'll want to know why." She thought about her apartment. The 3 locks on the door, the go bag under the floorboard, the window she always left cracked because she did not like to feel trapped. The life she had built out of exits. "One night," she said. She woke in a room that was too large and too quiet and far too comfortable, and for 2 full seconds she did not know where she was, and then the warmth came back, the chest warmth, the locket warmth, and she remembered. She lay still in the gray pre-dawn light and listened to the fortress. It breathed like a living thing. Old stones settling, wind against high windows, somewhere below a door, a voice, brief and low, and then silence. She found her way to the window and looked out at the territory. She had been inside this fortress once before, 4 years ago, on a different job for a different client. The outer walls only, the yard, the commercial quarter, never the inner sanctum. She had mapped it in her head and filed it away and moved on, the way she moved on from everything. But she had remembered the feeling of it, the particular quality of a place that had been built with intention, stone by stone, not to impress but to endure. Standing at the window in the early light, looking at the rooftops and the training yard and the far wall where the mountain fell away behind the fortress into the valley below, she understood something she hadn't understood the night before. This was not a cage she had walked into. The rooms were large because they were built for living, not containment. The door she had come through last night was unlocked now, and she had not needed to test it to know this. She had heard his second-in-command open it from the outside and leave it standing at 3 inches when the night guard changed. He had told her the truth. He had arranged the conditions and left the door open. What she did next was up to her. She dressed and went downstairs. He was in the courtyard. Not training, she passed the training yard and it was empty, the weapons racked and the sand undisturbed. He was in the smaller yard off the east wing, the one she hadn't mapped on her previous visit, sitting on the low wall with a mug of something and what appeared to be a letter that displeased him, because he had the look of a man performing the very careful task of remaining patient with paper. He did not startle when she appeared in the archway. He looked up as though he had expected her at precisely this moment, which she was starting to understand was simply how he moved through the world, as if time were a map he had already consulted. "There's tea," he said, "or there was. My second probably drank it. I don't need tea." She came through the arch and stood with her arms crossed, the way she stood when she was thinking rather than when she was being defensive, though she acknowledged the two were not always easy to distinguish. "I want to talk about Voss." "All right. Last night you told me you need the treaty clause upheld. That means keeping the document intact, which means keeping it from him, which means you have been playing defense for 4 years. She looked at him. That's not a strategy, that's a siege. He set the letter down. The expression that moved across his face was one she hadn't seen yet, something that was not surprise exactly, but the adjustment that comes before surprise, the microsecond when a calculation updates. Go on. Voss hired me because I can get into things. He didn't consider that I can also get out of them with information he didn't know I had. He told me the delivery window, the payment structure, and the name of his archivist, the one who processes the stolen documents when they come in. She sat down on the opposite end of the wall, a careful distance, and faced him. If the archivist can be reached before Voss realizes the job failed, you'd be walking into Voss's compound. I've walked into worse, she said it flatly, not bragging. I walked into yours last night. That moved something in his face too, and this time it was quieter, internal, not for show. He looked at her for a long moment in the growing morning light, and she held the look without flinching, because she had learned a long time ago that flinching was information you hadn't chosen to give. I won't send you in unprotected, he said. I didn't ask for protection. I asked if you could get me access to the Border Commission records before I go in because I need the archivist's route schedule. A pause. And I need to know if there's anything in those records about my mother's mapping work, the originals, not the redacted versions. He was quiet for a moment, not hesitating. She had watched him enough by now to begin reading the difference between hesitation and something else, something more deliberate. He was deciding how much to say and how to say it, and she appreciated that he was doing this rather than simply telling her what he thought she needed to hear. The originals are here, he said, in the vault. I recovered them 2 years ago. They're part of why Voss wants the treaty destroyed, because the treaty's territorial clauses protect the historical record he needs to erase. The warmth in her chest again, larger this time, she breathed through it. You've had them for 2 years, she said. Yes. And you didn't come and find me. I had no right to come and find you. He said it without apology, without defense, simply as a statement of principle, the way you state a law of physics. They were your mother's work. I had them secured and protected. When you were ready to have them, you'd be ready. He looked at her steadily. Last night you picked a lock that no one was supposed to be able to pick for the second time in 6 years. I'd say you're ready. She looked at the courtyard stones. Old granite, worn smooth by generations of feet. She thought about 9 years old and a locket that had gone missing. She thought about 6 years of document runs and careful anger, and the particular discipline of a person who wants something very much and has decided to want it in a way that doesn't destroy them. I want to see them, she said. I know, he stood. Come on. The originals were in a flat case on the second cedar shelf, sealed in a material she didn't recognize, translucent, faintly blue, preservation-grade something that had no name she knew. He opened the case with a key from his belt and handed her the first sheet, and she took it with both hands because it required both hands, the weight of it and the care of it, and because her hands were shaking slightly and she needed something to hold. Her mother's handwriting. She knew it from the single letter she had kept, a birthday note from years ago, careful cursive, the letters very clean and evenly spaced. The maps were the same, precise, annotated in that same careful hand, placed names in 3 languages, elevation markers that were still accurate by current surveying standards, borders drawn with the particular authority of someone who had been there, and looked and measured and understood. She did not cry. She didn't have that reflex. Instead, she stood in the vault with the map in her hands and breathed, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, and felt the warmth in her chest become something she did not have a word for, something adjacent to grief and adjacent to relief, and not quite either one. He stood a respectful distance away. He did not speak. He did not move toward her or away from her. He simply existed in the room with her, in the way of someone who understands that presence is sometimes the only thing that's useful. After a while, she lowered the map and looked at him. The clause in the treaty, she said. The one Voss needs to destroy. What does it actually say? It establishes territorial sovereignty for the indigenous cartographers of the Eastern Border Commission and grants their bloodline heirs legal standing in any future territorial dispute. He paused. Your mother was the lead surveyor on the original commission. Her heirs, you, have standing to challenge Voss's authority before the full Border Council. He cannot be removed by majority vote alone. But he can be removed by a standing bloodline challenge if the challenger has documentation. He looked at the map in her hands, which you now have. She absorbed this. You need me, she said. Yes. Not just because of the bond. The bond is why I looked. The documentation is why it matters. He said it straight, no flinching. I won't pretend one doesn't feed the other, but they're not the same thing, and I want to be clear about both of them. She set the map back in the case carefully, the way it deserved. She thought about Edric Voss and his 3 border councils and his hired operatives and his 4 years of playing offense while this man had played defense and waited. She thought about her mother drawing borders in a language she'd been killed for speaking. She thought about the locket, the crest, the wolf over the mountain. She thought about the door he had left open. All right, she said, here's what we're going to do. She spent the morning in the archive room with the Border Commission records and a pot of real tea that his second in command, a compact, watchful woman named Oren who had the air of someone who had seen considerably more than she was going to discuss, brought without comment. She worked the way she always worked, methodically, quietly, building the picture from the edges in. Voss's archivist was named Pell. Pell operated out of a receiving house 2 miles from the commission hall and kept a route that varied by day of week, but not by weather, which was the kind of operational laziness that Sira had learned to be grateful for in other people. The Alpha King, she had stopped not naming him in her head. His name was Kaelin, and she had found it in the commission records before he told it to her, and this small fact had pleased her in a way she did not examine too closely, moved in and out of the room through the morning, not hovering, not checking on her. He had his own work, his own people, his own fortress to run, and she observed this with the particular attention she brought to everything. The way he spoke to his pack members, without performance and without diminishment. The way they spoke back to him, which was the more revealing information. The way Oren watched him with the combination of loyalty and exasperation that only exists between people who have been through something genuine together. Around midday he came and stood in the doorway. I need to tell you something, he said, and I want to say it before you go into Voss's compound so that it's said and not unsaid. She set down the record she was reading. The bond, he said. You feel it. I know you feel it because I can. He stopped, restarted. Because I know what it feels like, and I know the look of someone who is managing it rather than living in it. He crossed his arms, and there was something almost careful in the gesture, as if he was choosing it deliberately. I don't expect you to want it. I don't expect you to accept it because it's convenient or because I've been useful to you this morning. The law of this house is that the bond is chosen or it is nothing, and I mean that. If you complete this task and walk out of here and never come back, that is a lawful thing. I will see it honored. A pause. But I wanted you to know that I have been waiting a long time, not impatiently, not with any claim on the outcome. But I want you to know that I have been waiting, and that the waiting was not hardship. She looked at him for a long moment. How long, she said. 3 years since your name came through a border commission inquiry. He said it without drama. I had my people look. I read the report. I read it again. Something moved in his face very briefly that was not the careful Alpha King expression she had been cataloging all morning. It was younger than that and less defended. I started reading her maps. Sira thought about her mother's handwriting, the careful cursive, the borders in 3 languages. She was good, she said. She was extraordinary. He said it the way he said everything straight, no ornament. So are you. She looked back at the records. She picked up the document she had set down. She was aware of her own heartbeat, which was doing something unusual, not racing, not afraid, something more like the sensation of a key finding the right pins. Click, click, click. Small, specific, settling. "I'll be back by nightfall," she said. "If I'm not, there's a secondary route through the East Passage, and Pell's schedule is on the 3rd page of the folder I've left open." "I know the East Passage." "Good." She stood and gathered what she needed. At the door she stopped and looked at him once more, because she was a person who collected information, and she wanted this image, this specific version of him in the doorway of the archive room with the morning light behind him and that younger thing still not fully closed in his expression. Kalen. He looked at her. "The door," she said, "the outer door that night, I know it unlocked." He said nothing. "I know you left it open." She held his gaze. "I just wanted you to know that I noticed." She walked out into the courtyard. Pell's receiving house smelled of ink and damp wool, and something chemical she didn't try to name. She was inside in 4 minutes and out in 9, which was tight but not uncomfortable, and she walked 3 blocks east before she opened the folder she had taken. The archivist had been efficient. There were 7 incoming document files in the current cycle, all logged, all with originating party codes that she photographed rather than removed. There was a commission brief that contained 3 names she recognized and 2 she didn't. There was a payment ledger. And there was a second commission brief, filed under a different date, in a code that would have meant nothing to anyone who hadn't spent 6 years learning Voss's operational language. She read it on her feet, standing in a narrow lane with pigeons and cold morning air, and felt the cold come in through a completely different route when she understood what she was reading. Voss was not trying to destroy the treaty. He already had. The document she had been sent to steal, the scroll case in the vault, was not the original treaty. It was a copy, and he had known it was a copy, and he had sent her to steal it, not to destroy it, but to force Kalen's hand, to make the Alpha King expose the vault location, change his security, potentially move the real treaty, so that Voss's second operation, the one that had been running quietly and parallel for 18 months, would know exactly where to look. She stood in the lane and thought about this for the count of 8. Then she turned and ran. She hit the fortress gate at speed, and the guard had about 1 second to decide whether to let her through, which he did, possibly because of her expression, possibly because Kalen appeared at the inner gate 10 seconds later and looked at her face and said, "What happened?" in a voice that was not a question. "He doesn't want the treaty copy," she said, still breathing hard. "He never wanted the copy. He wanted to know where you'd move the real one." A pause. A very brief, very still pause, and then Kalen turned and said something low to Oren that moved the second-in-command toward the interior at a speed that suggested she had already understood the shape of this before he finished the sentence. "How long do we have?" he said. "He filed the brief 18 months ago. If his second operation is already in position." She stopped, looked at him. "Where did you move it after last night?" He looked at her steadily. She watched him calculate the decision, not whether to trust her, she thought. That decision was older than this morning, something else. The Undercroft, behind the armory. "Does Oren know that?" "Oren knows everything I know." "Who else?" "2 people." "Then it's not those 2 people." She was already moving toward the interior. "Take me there." The Undercroft was intact. The real treaty was where it was supposed to be, the seal unbroken, the document in its original case. Older than the copy, the material darker, the crest on the clasp worn to smoothness by generations of hands. Oren had 3 guards at the entrance and 2 more at the secondary passage by the time they arrived, and Kalen stood in the Undercroft doorway with his arms crossed, and his expression doing the thing it did when he was thinking rather than performing, still, focused, very slightly terraced, like a cliff face that had been a long time making. "He knew the vault was a decoy," Kalen said. He sent you in anyway. He sent me in to trigger the response. Whatever you did after the alarm, moving the guards, changing the rotation, changing the lock back. I didn't change anything. He looked at her. I knew someone was coming in. I waited. Then he has no new information. She let out a slow breath. He sent in his second team last night and you didn't move. And now his second team has nothing. Except your involvement. He knows I failed the job. He doesn't know why yet. She thought about the payment ledger, the commission brief, the code she had learned over 6 years. He'll know by morning when his archivist does the inventory, but by morning. You'll have challenged the council. She met his eyes. I'll need the maps, she said, and the original commission charter if you have it. Third shelf, blue case. And a witness. The challenge has to be witnessed by a pack alpha. He did not look away from her. Yes, he said. That's you. That's me. The not quite smile, just the edge of it at the corner of his mouth. I'm aware. She looked at him and felt the warmth in her chest again. The warmth that had been there since the locket, since the vault, since the moment she had lowered herself onto a stool in a locked room and understood that the door was not actually locked. She had been managing it, the way he'd said, holding it at the edge of her attention, not letting it interfere with the work, which was the only way she knew how to do anything. She thought about 9 years old. She thought about 6 years of exits. She thought about the door she had not taken. After the council, she said, I want to see the rest of the territory. He was very still for a moment. All of it, he said. If it's going to be mine, I want to know the shape of it. She crossed her arms in the way that meant thinking rather than defense, and looked at him across the undercroft with the old treaty between them and 3 armed guards at the door and a morning that was moving fast toward noon. My mother mapped borders. I grew up with the idea that knowing a place means knowing where it starts and stops and what's true about the interior. She paused. I want to know what's true about this one. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said she would have liked it here. Sierra breathed. I think she did once. He crossed the undercroft in 4 steps, which was not fast but was deliberate, and stopped at a distance that was close enough to mean something and far enough to still be a choice. Hers, specifically, made by her or not made by her, according to nothing but what she decided. He looked at her with those coin-gold eyes and the tiredness in his jaw that was the weight of decisions, and he did not reach for her. He waited. She understood, finally, what kind of man spends 3 years reading a dead woman's maps because her daughter is somewhere in the world carrying her mother's borders in her blood, and does not come and claim it, does not send for it, does not force the conditions. Just protects what is worth protecting and leaves the door open, and sits in a chair in a vault in the dark, and waits to be found. She picked up the locket from where it still sat on the armrest shelf and held it in her palm. The warmth moved up through her hand and into her wrist, and she let it, for the first time since the vault, let it pass the glass and into the thing underneath. All right, she said, very quietly, not to him or not only to him, to the locket maybe, to the maps upstairs in the blue case, to 9 years old. Then she looked at him, and she stepped forward, and she closed the distance. His hand came up slowly and touched her face, just the back of his fingers against her cheek, careful, unhurried, and she felt the bond settle into place like a lock finding its pins. Not a cage, not a chain, the feeling of a door opening from the inside by her own hand. Don't smirk, she said. I'm not smirking, he said. I've never smirked in my life, a beat. I'm deeply restrained. She pressed her face briefly against his shoulder. Just a moment, just enough, and then stepped back. Treaty first, she said. Treaty first, he agreed. The Border Council convened at first bell. Voss arrived 2 minutes late and looked at the assembled documentation with an expression that moved through several stages in the time it took him to cross the floor. Sierra watched from the challenger's position, standing, as required, behind the table, with her mother's maps laid flat under preservation glass, and the original commission charter open to the signature page. And she watched his face make its calculations and come up short. The challenge was lawful. The bloodline was documented. The maps were verified by 3 independent archivists in the time it had taken to set the hall, because Kalen had started that process at dawn, which meant he had anticipated this. Not this exactly, but the shape of it, the general direction, the way a man who reads maps thinks about territory. She did not look at him during the proceedings. She kept her eyes on Voss and on the council members and on the documents, because this was work and she knew how to do it, and the warmth in her chest was a steady thing now, not a pull but a presence, and she let it be there without managing it. When the council voted, Voss's 3 seats split 2-1 against him. The 4th and 5th councils added their voices. He was removed before the second bell. He said nothing when he left. He walked out the way he had walked in, controlled, contained, and she thought, watching him go, that they were not finished. A man who had spent 4 years on a silent operation did not simply accept a council ruling and go home. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today the treaty was intact, and on the record and her mother's borders were witnessed and logged. She breathed. Outside the council hall, in the gray afternoon light, Oren was waiting with 2 horses, and a look that managed to convey both professional satisfaction and personal vindication simultaneously. Kalen came to stand beside her. "Well," he said. "Well," she agreed. "You could have negotiated the bloodline challenge at any point in the last 6 years," he said, not accusatory. It was the tone of someone noting something interesting. "As soon as you found the commission records." "I didn't have the original maps." "True," a pause. "Also, you didn't know about the challenge provision." "Also that," she looked at the council hall doors. "Also, I had a different way of doing things. The solo way. The Exetal way's available way." He was quiet for a moment, and now. She thought about the vault, the chair, the door that was not locked. She thought about walking into a fortress 3 floors underground and choosing to stay, and what that said about the person she was becoming, or had already become, or had always been under the exits and the glass and the 4 counts in, 4 counts out. "Now I want to see the territory," she said, "all of it. Including the eastern ridge. That's where my mother's maps have the oldest surveys." He looked at her with those eyes, and the not-quite smile was there. And this time she let herself see it fully, the warmth in it, the patience in it, the 3 years of maps and waiting and open doors. "The eastern ridge is beautiful in this light," he said. She looked at the horizon, where the mountain fell away into the valley her mother had mapped in careful cursive and 3 languages, border by border, distance by distance, the shape of a place that had always been waiting to be known. "Then let's go," she said. She swung up onto the horse without assistance, which she suspected he had anticipated, and which she suspected he had appreciated, and she rode out through the gate of the fortress into the territory that was hers now, hers by blood, hers by choice, hers by a lock she had cracked in 11 seconds, and a door she had walked through all on her own. Behind her, she heard him follow. She did not look back. She did not need to. For the first time in 6 years, the exit was not the most important part of the room.